Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to the Blood Red Morning Bulletin. I'm your host for today, Patrick Smith, and I'm joined by Liverpool.com's Ben Boxtrack to bring you the latest Liverpool FC news. We are live, of course, every weekday at 10 a.m. here on the Blood Red channel and across Liverpool.com, Facebook and Twitter. Ben, how are you doing? Been a while since you've been on one of these shows.
Yeah, all good, yeah. Enjoying the last few days of the transfer window. It's heating up, it's getting excited, and I think I still expect Liverpool to do business ins and outs. So yeah, it should be an exciting next longer than a week, but yeah, it should be exciting.
Yeah, I think we just know we're going to get some mad deadline day rush, aren't we? So we may as well take our holiday days now, Ben, and then brace ourselves for that. Yeah, as you said, there's 10 days to go. There's been a lot of players who've been talked about a lot on the show, but there's some fresh rumours today. One of them is a bit of a revival, actually. We'll start with Kalvin Phillips, shall we? This one has propped up before. We've basically dispelled it as rubbish, but let's talk about it anyway, because it is potentially an interesting one. So I think it's TalkSport are the latest to report that Liverpool are in talks with him, or he's on their radar, or something or other. Now, let's be hypothetical here, Ben. Liverpool need a defensive midfielder. Kalvin Phillips does fit that bill, doesn't he?
He does. And let's be honest, if we were talking a couple of years ago when he was impressing at the Euros, we would have all taken him. We would have been rubbing our hands and been, yeah, he's perfect for Liverpool. Obviously, since then, he's had some injury problems at Man City. The move didn't quite work out. So it's a different proposition than a couple of years ago. But you know what? I might be in the minority here, but I wouldn't be too disappointed if Liverpool were to bring him in. I think he's still got a lot to offer. And obviously Manchester City is a tough environment to in terms of having Rodri there, who's one of the best holding midfielders in the world. So yeah, I think it's a tough environment to break into. So I wouldn't be too disappointed with him, to be honest.
It is an interesting one, isn't it? The report says basically that Liverpool, had looked at him when he was at Leeds and they missed out on him when he went to City. They've always admired him, supposedly, but I'm not sure. But I mean, we spoke yesterday on the pod. I forget which defensive midfielder we were talking about. But let's say they've already got Wataru and he's quite a senior player. People were, a bit tentative to want to sign a young defensive midfielder like Lavia because you could take away Bajcetic's minutes. Kalvin Phillips is that perfect middle ground between the two, I suppose, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he was born in 96 or 95, wasn't he? So he's kind of in his prime, so to say.
95, yeah, he's 27.
Yeah, 95. So he's kind of hitting his prime. He's still got a few years left at the top of his game. And like I said, just in terms of watching him at Leeds and even for City, he kind of ticks a lot of boxes in terms of the way he reads the game. Obviously, he was likened to Pirlo at Leeds United, and I think he's really good at just bringing control into that midfield, and that's what I feel like Liverpool lacked all throughout last season. We couldn't get a hold of games. We couldn't get a grip in games. It was the same against Chelsea at the start of the season. This time around, Jurgen Klopp said the possession was a joke, and that was because Liverpool just couldn't control the game. And Phillips does that for you. I know, because he's at a rival and because he hasn't featured a lot for Manchester City, people are going to be rolling their eyes at this rumour. But I think potentially, if you ignore all of that, and if you compare some of the other players Liverpool are looking for, like Ryan Gravenberch, who probably has even more question marks over him over Phillips, the only upside to him is that he's younger, so he's got a lot more probably potential. I think I might be tempted more to take Phillips because he's also homegrown, and I think that's a key factor. I mean, I know Gravenberch doesn't have to be registered until next year, but next year is not that far away, and if he does come in a permanent deal, then there are going to be question marks in terms of what will happen next summer. Who will Liverpool have to get rid of? Whereas Phillips, you bring him in and you don't have to worry about that at all.
Yeah, that's the thing that maybe swings it for me, the fact that, Liverpool need a sort of stopgap defensive midfielder signing for now, just while Basetic is coming through. And having Phillips for a year could actually be a very good option. But that also poses the nightmare scenario of you're loaning a player from your rivals, Man City, potential Premier League title rivals, we hope. And then if he has an amazing season at Liverpool and then goes back to City, and they'll have the player who's so Liverpool back in their squad, that'd be a nightmare of a scenario, wouldn't it? But I mean, yeah, I'm actually quite open to the move, as you say. They're having a ball-playing defensive midfielder, something we've not seen for a very long time. I mean, can't think the last time we had a holding midfielder who's actually a decent, passer of the ball. Because as much as Fabinho is competent enough, he wasn't exactly a ball-playing six, was he? So yeah, certainly an interesting one. He's robust enough. Maybe I could be open to that move, but I'd be unsure whether Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp would agree to that one. But yeah, interesting rumour nonetheless. And I'm sure that'll pop up, over the next 10 days as every defensive midfielder in the world will probably be linked to Liverpool. But let's move on then, shall we, to another player who can play in the six, Manu Kone. Ben, we've spoken at length about him before. It's sort of gone quiet, hasn't it, the Manu Kone rumours for the past month or so, I'd say. It's been, there's a lot of heavy talk in June and start of July, but for the August, I can't remember talking about him on this pod, actually. But yeah, Monchengladbach's manager, Roland Verkus, insists it would take an immense offer for the club to consider selling Manu Kone. He's 22, can play in the 6 and the 8, as we know, Ben. Now, should Liverpool be looking at the immense fee here, or would you be steering clear at that sort of money?
I think, obviously, the reason it's gone quiet is because he has been injured. So that hasn't helped things, I think, in terms of, I think he's still recovering from that injury, and I don't think he'll be back until September. So obviously September is not that far away now, but with his sort of injury record, especially last season, I think he had 3 or 4 injuries. They weren't like long-term injuries, quite short-term ones. I think this has been his longest sort in terms of how much length of time he's missed. But it is a kind of a red flag when it comes to him. I do like him. I think he's a quality player. I think, like with a lot of options who are being linked with, he's not a specialist number 6. He's someone who likes to play in a double pivot. And I think because of that, obviously he will come with even more question marks, not just about his fitness, but his suitability to be a Fabinho replacement. I don't think he's that kind of player. I think he's more just someone who could play potentially alongside a Thiago or a Basetic, and they'll form a double pivot. And I think, the way Liverpool are going, the kind of recruitments they are making, I can see Liverpool playing that double pivot a lot next season, and Kone does fit into that. But the immense fee that they're talking about, I mean, we don't know what that is by Bundesliga standards. We kind of know what that is by Premier League standards, with Crystal Palace wanting a similar sort of fee for Decore, which is their immense fee. I think is around £70 million. Those are the rumours. We don't know what that translates to Bundesliga level. Maybe we're talking about 40-50 million. But I think for Kone, that is still a high risk strategy. I mean, we don't know what he would be like in the Premier League, and I think it's always a gamble to bring players for that kind of fees to the Premier League. We've seen a lot of Bundesliga players, like the likes of Jadon Sancho, struggle. I mean, so especially with his history of injuries, I would be steering clear.
That's the point I was going to reiterate. I mean, he picked up that injury, as you said. I think it was during the under-21 Euros, wasn't it? And he's still not recovered from it. I think they're expecting him back after the international break. That's just going to be the biggest red flag to all of our viewers here and Liverpool fans around the world, isn't it? If someone's already got a few injury problems, you're not going to want to sign an injured player. It just sets that bad precedent that we've seen so many times before with Liverpool midfielders, doesn't it? But yeah, check Decore, as you say. I watched him actually last night on Monday Night Football. Wasn't immensely impressed by him. I mean, very tidy player, solid enough on the ball, but 70 million, I'm not entirely sure that's the way to go. But just on that then, so you mentioned there that Kone isn't an orthodox number 6. Now, we've seen Jurgen Klopp turn many players into different positions, turn Wijnaldum from a winger to a centre midfielder. Gakpo at the moment's playing as a centre mid. Do you think they'll go for an out-and-out defensive midfielder, someone like a Kalvin Phillips? Or do you think they'll maybe go for a Kone Gravenberch style, and we'll see Klopp try and transform him into that defensive midfielder? What way do you think he'll go?
Based on reports, you'd have to assume no. A lot of the suggestions yesterday was that Liverpool were not going for a specialist number 6. Do I think that's the right decision? I'm not quite sure. But I do think there is a potential for Liverpool to play a midfield diamond, which Jurgen Klopp used to do back in the day at Borussia Dortmund, and with the likes of Wataru Endo coming in, who he has played most of his minutes for Stuttgart in a double pivot. The likes of Thiago returning. I think Bajcetic for me is maybe not necessarily an out and out holding midfielder. I kind of like him better in a more hybrid role. So the double pivot would also suit him. So for me, I think it depends on what Liverpool's plans are for the midfield. If your plans are to not replicate last season or the success of Jurgen Klopp's era with the three in midfield and with Fabinho anchoring, and you're moving on to a sort of new dimension, a different formation, then I can understand why you would bring in a Gravenberch who can play multiple roles. And I think it would make sense to bring in a Gravenberch in that case as well, because you don't necessarily need a proper holding midfielder if you're playing a double pivot, especially because McAllister has done well in that role, and if you put him alongside Wataru Endo, which unfortunately we didn't see against Bournemouth because of the sending off, but that's got the potential for success. You put in Thiago, you put in Bajcetic as well alongside McAllister, and I think he can thrive in that position. So yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see what Liverpool decide, because I think it will determine how Liverpool will line up as well for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree with you there, definitely. I mean, we spoke about Gravenberch on yesterday's show, and I'm actually a big fan of him. I said I've not actually seen him play at Bayern Munich, but I remember him watching him a few times at Ajax, and he's such a talent. And I'm not sure on this, but from the looks of things, it looks like he's crying out to be coached properly and, someone transform him. I think Klopp could definitely turn him into that six. I mean, say 6'3" or something, 6'3", 6'4", isn't he? Big physical presence, obviously fantastic on the ball. I think that's the one they should be going for. And then, of course, he can play further forward if need be as well. If, maybe playing against a tighter match, you won't have Endo in there as that rock-solid six. Bit more solidity, I'd say, in the midfield, maybe from Gravenberch compared to a Szoboszlai or a McAllister, but then you can't really drop one of those two, can you, based on their performance on Saturday. Let's move on to our last transfer we'll discuss of the day. It's another number 6, Andre at Fluminense. And they basically reiterated their intentions to keep him. That's not good news for Liverpool, Ben. Is it basically, we knew that if they were knocked out of the Copa Libertadores, they were open to selling him. But of course, I think they're still in the competition, still involved, pretty heavily in a top 4 race, I think, in the Brazilian league. So can you see this one happening anytime soon, Ben, with Andre? Or do you think it'll be a case of revisiting that one in January?
I think if it does happen in the summer, it will be later on. I'm pretty sure Fluminense play their first or second leg in the Copa Libertadores on the 31st of August. So depending on what happens there, Liverpool might have an opportunity to swoop in and bring him in. But I do think it makes a lot of sense to wait until the winter window, as much as that sounds surprising, I think, to a lot of Liverpool fans. I think just in terms of how many minutes Andre has already played this year, he's been involved fully in Fluminense this season. He's played a lot of minutes. Obviously, then he would come into Liverpool and also be expected to play a lot of minutes. I don't know how that is going to affect him. Whereas, if you wait until December, he's going to have a little bit of a rest when he comes in January, and he'll be able to recuperate and come back a lot fresher, rather than, plucking him away mid-season when he's probably got a lot of tired legs in him. So in that sense, I think it would probably be worthwhile to wait a little bit longer. But obviously, given Liverpool's needs in terms of the midfield, that's probably not what you want and not what you'd like to hear. I do think he's a good fit for Liverpool. Again, I think he's someone who would work better in a double pivot rather than as a sole holding midfielder. So it will be interesting to see what happens there. I think it's more likely, though, that Liverpool wait it out until January. And I think it will be worth it for Liverpool, because in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of South Americans come into the Premier League since these Brexit rules have been changed. The likes of Caicedo, for example, who, made a step up from Ecuador. McAllister was similar. Enzo Fernandez, of course. I mean, he didn't come to the Premier League straight away. He went to Benfica, but Liverpool had the opportunity to bring him in for 15 million. Passed up on that, and 6 months later he was a £100 million player. So I think Andre has the potential to follow a similar route, and I think because of that, he is definitely one worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, can't wait for Brighton to sign him for 25 million, then get a Premier League move for
Don't say
130
that.
million. Yeah, I mean they signed. I think it's Fabricio Diaz, the Uruguayan player, they're about to sign as well. Some great talents emerging from South America, and hopefully Liverpool could maybe just cut out the middleman with Andre. It's a good point you make there, Ben, because my mindset was he could come in and hit the ground running because he's halfway through a season, but then also he could burn out by January and probably get himself injured. Fluminense's fixtures, for viewers who are probably going to be keeping a little eye on this, they're actually playing on this Friday, early hours of Friday morning against Olympia, and then the second leg is the 1st of September. Is that the day the window shuts? I think the 1st, isn't it? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe so. So I think
that's at 1:30 in the morning on the Friday the 1st. So if they're knocked out, Liverpool could maybe try and sign him on that deadline day. But yeah, who knows if that one's going to pan out with Andre. Certainly an interesting player, though. One definitely to keep an eye on. I think for January, I think the likely scenario is Liverpool go into the season, struggle without another number 6, probably bring him in January. I think we can all see that being a mile away, can't we? But yeah, anyway, let's hope they can get someone in before the end of deadline day. They really need a 6, don't they? And of course, a centre-back as well. We'll talk about that probably in one of the shows this week. As I said, we are live every weekday at 10 a.m. right here on the Blood Red channel and Liverpool.com, Facebook and Twitter. And make sure, everyone, you check out the Liverpool.com written content from brilliant writers like Ben. But for now, thank you for joining myself, Patrick Smith, and Ben Bokshak. We'll catch you again soon.